So in this video we're going to take another look at feedback and how to make sure that your feedback is really useful for students. So feedback needs to do two things. It needs to feedback, and by that we mean that it should clearly explain how you arrived at the mark. It should be explicit about which learning outcomes the student has met or not met and how well. It should discuss any specific generic criteria and why the work deserves the grade band you've awarded. It should also highlight what the student has done well and where there's room for improvement. And secondly, it should be actionable, so it should feed forward. It should highlight areas for development and explain how students can do better next time. So what could they do next time to achieve a grade in that higher boundary? Highlight an area of practice they should focus on. You can even offer links to resources that might help, or suggest that they book a tutorial moving forward. Sometimes we talk about this in terms of medal mission. So this was defined by Jeff Petty, 2008, and it's a good place to start when thinking about how to balance your feedback. So thinking about highlighting strengths, but also the areas of development and action points that will really help them to use assessment as a learning tool rather than just something that tells them how good they are at whatever the subject is. So students need to know what they've done right or well, and need to know this so that they'll keep on doing it right, and because it will make them feel good about their work as well, which can aid learning and helps them to feel more motivated. And they also need to know why it was right or good, because sometimes they do well by accident. So just telling them it was right or good is not necessarily enough to ensure that they'll keep on doing the good stuff. Sometimes you might struggle to say something good. We've all seen shocking performances and it's really hard to pick something out. And unless it's obvious that the students made no effort at all, it's really a good idea to at least say something. So a few generous words will really go a long way to helping the student engage with the rest of the feedback, not react negatively to something that is very, very critical. If you look back at the language and tone video, we discuss the fact that, if students are faced with lots of criticism, they're unlikely to see some of the really helpful developmental stuff in the feedback as well. And be specific. So words like great or excellent carry a strong emotional message, but they don't explain why. And again, we spoke about this in the language and tone video about expanding on any value judgments that you include. But strengths and medals really important to include to help boost student confidence and also help them know that they're heading in the right direction, even if there's still quite a long way to go. And similarly, students need to know what they've done wrong or poorly and in what respects it was wrong or poor and inappropriate. And then they also need suggestions on ways in which it could have been correct or better, because again, this helps student confidence. Rather than just critiquing or giving negative feedback, we actually help students to see the preferred approach, appreciate why their answer or their approach was incorrect, identify ways in which they can improve their practice to ensure that they receive a better grade next time. So when doing this, obviously you do need to give some bad news. You need to let them know that an area of their work needs improvement, but rather than just saying it was terrible, dreadful, you need to think about how you deliver that bad news to ensure that it's received in the best possible way. So some ways you can make sure that this is received effectively is to ensure your bad news or your critique is specific. So make it really clear to what you're reacting, which word, which idea, which feature, make it really clear in what respects the work is incorrect or inappropriate or whatever it is. The linked annotation tool on Turnitin is really useful for that if you're working, if you're marking a written piece of work, because you can highlight exactly the idea or the issue within the work that needs improvement and make a note on how it can be better. Constructive, so again, suggest how the work could have been made accurate. So this is the developmental side of it. So could you, if you've got time, if it's kind of a small error, could you give an example of what would be the right approach, or could you refer them to someone where they could actually explore what that right approach might be? And be kind. So being specific is kind, being constructive and kind. Just writing poor or lots of exclamation marks saying this is dreadful is actually really cruel and can really hurt that student, or maybe they've put a lot of effort in. And even if they haven't, they still don't need that kind of language. It's not going to help them to improve their motivation. So as well as general developmental feedback, and I would encourage whenever you write something fairly critical in your feedback to then follow that with something that's developmental. It's also a really good idea to include 1 to 3 areas of deliberate practice or action points I wouldn't do more than that because it can be overwhelming for the students, but you will find now on the feedback sheets we're using for this year, both in Excel and on Turnitin, there is, as well as the strengths box, there is a box at the end for action points where you can kind of sum up the key areas of deliberate practice that you want the students to work on between now and their next assessment. And these are really, really useful for students to refer back to, and in fact as a tutor, if you are teaching these students, you can ask them to bring their key action points to class and maybe work on building, creating action plans with them as part of your weekly sessions. And do keep it realistic, think about what's manageable for that student. So obviously there are many ways in which they can improve, but really think about them taking that next step up in their development rather than aiming here and something that's going to be not achievable or overwhelming for them. So it's important to get the balance right. Students need to engage positively with feedback, and they're not likely to do that if they're experiencing strong negative emotions. So just a few key things in reading here. Motivation and self-esteem play a very important role in learning and assessment. And assignments are very personal and individual, so if students are receiving negative feedback, they can take that quite personally and feel that really deeply, and that can be really damaging to their motivation. If they see themselves as a failure, early in their education, it's more, it's kind of think about as you're not here yet, and here are ways that you can actually develop your practice, develop your knowledge, or whatever it may be, so that you can get there, rather than this is terrible, you're a failure. This is the way that we want students to think, is okay, I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. And as I've said in the language and tone video as well, imagine that you are on the receiving end of that feedback. Is it balanced? Would you be able to, would you be comfortable with presenting it to that student in a tutorial, for example? So that's it here really, but I would really suggest that you take a moment now to just reflect on some of the feedback that you've given in the past. So maybe pick out 3 pieces of student work from a range of different marks, maybe a script from the low range, mid-range and high range, and just print the feedback out if you can, or do it on your computer, and highlight all the comments relating to the strengths of work in each piece. Use another colour to highlight developmental comments, and just ask yourself, is the balance of feedback about writing each one? Is the tone and language consistent across all of the pieces, or are you finding that you're a bit nicer to the students who have got higher grades? Does it look different depending on the standard of the student work? And are the comments that you haven't highlighted useful? Could you have framed them more constructively or in a more developmental way? And then perhaps write yourself some developmental feedback. So what are the strengths that you can see in your own assessment feedback? And what are your areas of development? Where could you improve and how might you do that? Okay, that's it. Please do come to me or your course leader for any advice in this area, and I'll see you in another video. Thanks, bye.